Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monty Bottens. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Today we welcome Ben Mest, a third-generation grain and livestock farmer located in Stephenson County, Illinois, near the Wisconsin border, where he and his family own and operate a hog and cash crop operation. Ben is the president of High Plains Grains, which he operates with his brother Grant Mest and two other partners. They raise 100% non-GMO corn and non-GMO soybeans, along with small grains including wheat, rye, and oats. They practice multi-species cover cropping on all of their acres annually and hope to begin the integration of livestock on the land sometime this year. Their primary focus in crop production is on soil conservation and building healthy, well-functioning soils that are improving over time. Family, communication, and legacy are all part of this exciting conversation where we hear how they're all working together in the operation and bringing their specific skills and talents together to create a well-oiled machine. In addition, we learn a lot about the mindset of building communication, fine-tuning management opportunities, and ultimately growing a business that utilizes and encourages new ideas. This conversation with Ben is so encouraging. The way his family approaches change and how they work together to communicate their individual desires and goals is just exciting. And communication is really a big part of this equation. Recognizing that there are different ways for different types of operations to implement practices and build resiliency in today's agriculture is also exciting to hear. Ben believes farming production models of the future will be much more diverse and sustainable than they are today. And he's most excited about doing his part to help design, develop, test, and implement those models right on his own farm. Ben says healthy people come from healthy ecosystems, and healthy ecosystems start with healthy soils. It's a great conversation, so let's jump right in.
Welcome to this edition of the AgEmerge podcast. I'm really excited. We have a first today. We are joined live in studio with Ben Mest. How are you doing today, Ben?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, great. Well, Ben's down here because when we're recording today, it's been the coldest day of the year so far. It's still not above zero, and we're in the middle of the day. So he escaped the cold, I escaped the cold, and we decided to be in here recording. So thanks for coming down. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer to come out.
Well, Ben, tell us a little bit about you, your farm, where you're located, the crops you grow, a little bit of your family story.
Yeah, so I'm from Lena, Illinois area, and so it's just south of the Wisconsin border, a little bit in northwest Illinois. Currently live on and grew up on a family hog operation mainly. My dad started I would be third generation technically now, but basically a hog operation since the early 80s. It's a confinement operation. We for years were farrow to finish, hogs, everything. My dad started it with my grandpa, and they grew it over a number of decades there. And just over the last couple of years, actually, we switched that business up. We're no longer finishing pigs, and we just farrow out of our sow units and sell wean pigs. And so that's kind of where we're there. And then we've, through that whole process of the years, had a grain operation, as most livestock producers do. They raise crops to try and feed their livestock. And so had a grain operation for years. And that's kind of my involvement in it today is on the grain operation side of it. And it's still a family run operation. I'm the youngest of four kids. I got an older brother, and then I got two older sisters, and 3 out of the 4 of us are involved in the farm. Me and my brother mainly focused on the grain side of the operation. Then my sister has a main focus on still running the sow units with my dad on the hog side of things. And then my oldest sister, it's funny enough, she's the only one not involved in the operation, but she actually now lives in the farmhouse on the operation. So she's still very much there and in a way involved without being in the day-to-day operation. So
isn't that how farming works? You just can't get away from it.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. But yeah, no, they moved on to the farm there recently, and that was good to see. So yeah, Still very much family run and operated and all that stuff. But
so you've just gone through a family transition, really?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You were
So
telling about dad moving to town and didn't know how that'd work. And
yeah, so dad, my parents moved off the farm this past year, and then, like I said, my sister and her husband and family moved in on the farm, and then on the business side of things, what we kind of worked out this year was we broke apart the hog business, where for years it's one hog business. It's technically multiple businesses within it. We had a trucking division and then a grains division, so to speak. And so what we did was broke that out. So now my brother and I run the grain portion of the business as a separate entity. It's called High Plains Grains is the entity there, and then High Plains Pork is the pork business, and basically run it as two separate shows, but not separate show. It's a weird thing, but the main reason with that was, in the transition part of this thing, was we were trying to get a setup that could help us grow that next generation. Like, the next generation can take over and figure out a new path for the farm, kind of family legacy type deal. And so we did that. And then also the trucking division got broke out. My brother runs a equipment hauling and kind of a mix of stuff, trucking business as well. So
really making sure every enterprise can stand on its own,
right,
and be profitable on its own. Because I think we've had a chance to Ben came down yesterday. We brainstormed all day long at the farm, and we didn't do much soil digging because the ground was
a little hard.
A little hard. But we've been brainstorming a little bit, and you were telling me that sometimes when you're running cost of production, it's like, well, especially in negative commodity years, it's like we're better off buying corn versus feeding our own corn because of the cost structure. Mm-hmm. So that's making you a little more accountable by taking those cropping operations and livestock operations and separating it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's kind of was my angle coming into the farm. I to give it background, I graduated college from University of Wisconsin Platteville in 2018, and I went directly out of school to work in Chicago for a dairy risk management company. I'm got my Series 3 license and the whole bit, and was a broker for a little bit, and also do insurance through that. And so I was coming from the ultimate goal with that endeavor was I was thinking about coming back to the farm. Eventually, I didn't know when, but I said my niche would be on the finance or the risk management side of it. It's just how my brain's centered around that type of thing. And so I came back earlier than I expected after only a year and a half in Chicago. Not because I didn't like Chicago or anything. It was we dipped our toe in the waters of the hemp industry in 2019, and my brother and I kind of spearheaded a project together, and that's what brought me back sooner than I was expecting. And I said, well, now I'm here, I'm not going to leave again. And so the financial side of the business is my focus. And I was looking at that. The grains have always played second fiddle, if you will, to hogs. Family operation, dad's been the main manager you can only manage so much. So grains have always just kind of taken a back seat. You just generally track costs, things like that. But, I'm a very, very anal with numbers and stuff. I like spreadsheets. And so I just started digging on that side. Just a lot of waste. And, like you talked to the accountant. I looked at cost of production over several years. I'm like, we could have just bought this cheaper. Like, that would have been more margin for the hogs. Like, what are we doing here?
And for a little more background too, you guys had gotten into a continuous corn.
Yeah. We were just all corn
for a long period because you had to have the bushels to feed the hogs, and you were buying more corn in above and beyond what you were raising to feed the hogs. So, that had gotten you to where being in a continuous corn maybe wasn't the most yield or profitable type scenario because of added inputs and stuff. So
absolutely,
basically what you determined is, hey, we'd be better, or you and your family came to a determination that you'd be better to get to a rotation in order to improve the profitability of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to buy more corn in, but that like you said, you change from feeders to weaners essentially. And but in that period of time, it's just using that concept to let's grow our crops as most profitable and then allow our hogs to be as profitable too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it was one of those things. It's the hogs had to carry a lot of overhead and excess costs that had nothing to do with raising a pig, really, to be honest. It was very indirect costs that it was just covering for years as overhead, and it's you really start to dig in and you realize, okay, there's there's some serious things weighing down profitability here that has nothing to do with the, how efficiently we're producing pounds of pork or, all those other metrics that go into it.
Right.
And so I was like, I talking with, my brother and I brought a couple outside family partners in a small stake and get new perspective on the business. And we just kind of brainstormed that idea, let's break these entities up, stand them on their own and kind of run them as their own shows. And I think, the theory there is to run them as their own shows and make the greater pie stronger or better, the whole family operation. It's yes, they're two businesses, but we still see each other every day on the same site, so it's still as if it's one business, but just on the actual dollar side and that side is better.
That's kind of unique what you're talking about. You brought in some people that are outside the family, right? So that's very unique. Most family, we're all family farms, right? And we just know what we know really within our own family or maybe with friends and neighbors. So we really get kind of inwardly looking and myopic in our view of farming. You brought in these people that are really outside of production agriculture to be a part of the farm. Talk about that. What was that like making that decision to do that? What's it been like having them and having a different perspective? And how could that benefit other farmers to consider something like that? Maybe not in an equity position, but just in an advisory position.
Yeah. So I guess I would backtrack a little bit before I go to that. What kind of with the idea of why we even thought to bring somebody outside. So Dad growing up always made, we were never the kids growing up on the family farms. I know kids are typically viewed as free labor on a lot of family operations. Thankfully, my dad never, or my mom, dad, we were never viewed that way. So we weren't forced to work. Like my sisters and stuff worked very consistently through, but they were always paid as normal employees and things like that. And we weren't allowed to work on the farm in summers, like through college. Dad always wanted, go get a job somewhere else. That was his thing. He always wanted to go get a job somewhere else. New perspective.
Okay.
When I was young, I didn't understand. I said, okay. I mean, I wasn't crazy about working all day in the hog farm anyway. So I was like, okay, I'll get a job somewhere else. So like through college, I had 2 summers. I worked concrete on a flat work crew and just kind of worked on a dairy farm one summer and things like that. And so the idea of new perspectives, and I really enjoyed those experiences because you find out what it's like to work for another manager that's not your dad, that does things differently. Sometimes it was a lot better. And sometimes it was, oh, okay, well, now I appreciate kind of some of the things that's going on in my world because it not worse. I don't mean to say it in a bad way, but it's just different at the end of the day. And so you just see different perspectives on things. And there's a lot of value in that. I think I learned a lot when I reflect on things, learned a lot of good things just from jobs that had nothing to do with ag, just people and hard work, things like that. I mean, there was a lot to learn in concrete. It was the weirdest thing, like the hardest physical demanding job on you. And you basically, at the end of the day, you feel so proud because you have something to look at. It's a physical structure and it seems so simple.
And you better have something to look at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Otherwise
For what you, no kidding. And so it's just little things like that is cool and get lessons. And so just that, it put me into that mindset of being more open to new perspectives. And then, so it just kind of years go by then, and then now I'm back to the operation. And I mentioned earlier, the 2019 hemp endeavor we did. So the 2 partners we brought in on the grain operation, we bled it out in the trenches together in the year of 2019 hemp production. They had a harvest company they started just to harvest hemp, and we were on the production side as the farmer. And that's how we came together. They came to us with the harvesting opportunity, and they had this special baler and the whole bit. Well, they ended up needing our help a lot more to carry this through for the other customers they had, because we had the farming, expertise and pairing together.
Were you growing the hemp for them then too? Or you were just helping them with the harvest of hemp?
Helping with the harvest. Yep.
Okay.
We paid them to harvest.
You weren't able to retire independently wealthy in 1 year like everybody else in the hemp industry?
No, I don't know. We must have been
else in the hemp industry.
Yeah, we must have just been that lucky one person that didn't make anything, because that was the time to be in there. But right. But no, it was good. We did a lot of really unique and I think kind of first time things in the hemp space. Like first time or close to, kind of more innovative things. Like we mechanically planted it, going into that season, it was said, hand plant
plants, or was that seed plants?
seed by seed.
Okay.
Because I'm a row crop farmer from the Midwest.
Sure.
I saw all the buzz was being made out west in dryland country where they got transplants and drip tape and that whole bit. And they said,
Right.
this is how you raise hemp. I was like, what? We're
That's
used
a
to
lot of work.
scale and we're used to modern tools. Like,
Can't plant 500 acres a day that way.
yeah. And it's one of those things. I just said, that ain't gonna happen. I was like, I'm a row crop farmer from the Midwest. So me and my brother just said, oh, we can mechanize at least a large portion of this. Make no mistake, we were out there every day in the summer hand hoeing weeds once this crop was growing because it was an organic raised crop.
Yep.
So 60 acres was probably a little bit too much for that portion, I'll say. But really though, it was just it was a good experience with those partners I mentioned. Like that was just a rough fall and there was so much to figure out because we ended up harvesting on that end. They used a Shelbourne Reynolds head and we figured out a way to tune one of those up it didn't do a perfect job stripping the plants, but it showed very much a promise.
And the hemp you were growing was for CBD.
Yeah, it was
So
feminized hemp for CBD production.
So the stripper header would have been removing buds and
leaves. Yep.
Which is where
and
the
some branch material.
Yeah, but buds and leaves are where the CBD's at, right?
Because
So
when you
that
were
was
looking
kind
at
of an
stocks on it like that,
right?
And CBD's sold on a percentage of volume type basis, you go, we knew going into, because we're used to like when settling corn and stuff like that, and you get dockages and stuff, and you just understand if things work on percentages. We said, we're going to dilute this so much, even if we put because with CBD hemp it's all about flower to stem ratio. You need a much higher ratio of biomass in the flowers relative to the stem. Well, stuff we were growing we did wide centers and things like that. So it was huge stalks.
Trees.
Yeah. That was just too much weight.
How in the world did you get that through a Shelbourne stripper? I mean, with those big.
So there was some R&D
over, or how did that?
Yeah. So we went two ways.
How tall was your hemp?
It was 8 foot,
right?
8 foot. I got pictures. I'm 6'4" and I got pictures. It's 3-4 feet taller than me.
Holy smokes.
And we had to go two ways. We went one direction and then come back the other to get the other half.
The other way.
Yeah. Cause those hemp plants, you ever been out in the field and seen them? It's You ever try to pull one? It's you might as well get a shovel out because you ain't gonna pull it by hand.
Or a backhoe. Yeah.
Right. No kidding. So it feels like that. But so we did that. We harvested both ways and it didn't do perfect, but it did very well, much better than like just going with an Orbis head and a full chop. Because we did a lot of Orbis head chopping and we did compare biomass
or hand harvesting.
And hand harvesting.
How many people were doing hand harvesting? I mean, there was crews.
We did 60 acres. The only way we decided to do 60 acres was we said we have to have other things in place. That was the mechanized planting, mechanized harvest. And then we had a drying system also that we bought and installed because we said we don't have a SoFi stadium on reserve to go hang up. Literally like only 5 acres would probably fit in that because we helped the year before another guy do it by hand. And man, he had this dairy farm and we helped hang up all these plants and it was only like a few acres of plants and every last building on that guy's farm was stuffed to the gills with plants and trying to dry stuff out. And we're just like, this isn't from a consumer standpoint too. You're like, that's tough too.
Was it hanging in the freestall barns with the cows? Or?
No, he was retired. He was retired. Okay. So he just had buildings. I forgot to mention that piece. Cows are munching on the buds as they're going to milk.
That could have been something.
Yeah. At least the cows will be nice and relaxed going to milk.
I suppose they may not be excited to go at all.
Yeah.
So the harvesting technology that you use, the Shelbourne, you get it. And then did that go directly into this baler then?
Yeah.
Or did it?
Yeah.
Grow it? How did that work?
We had wagons pulling it behind it's pretty straightforward. It's nothing like that crazy, but just pulling regular silage carts behind the chopper and we'd haul back over to the farm and we had the baler. The baler was a stationary setup and it's got a big hopper bin with a conveyor in it. So you just back the wagon in and drop the load. And we actually did a whole webinar a couple summers ago for local community college on it. Did a whole video on it. I'll have to send you that.
Yeah, if you send it to us, we'll put it in the show.
Yeah, sure. But that was kind of encapsulated the whole, and then we narrated it through it.
It'd be funny to see a Shelbourne header on the front of a chopper.
And believe me, there was some R&D that went into that. The first time we ran it, we made it. We did it on some other guy's field, and he just had a little patch. We made it one pass down, and this is like this might be 2 acre patch, and it looked like a jack-o'-lantern after one pass. So the teeth were gone. I mean, there was just sections, on across that head gone. We're like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but made some adjustments to the machine. That's where the magic's at, is the adjustments in the machine with the rotor and things like that. And some R&D teeth we put in there and some things like that. And finally made it go to where it was enough to where you said, okay, this has some weight.
So you got it chopped in silage wagons, and you put it in compressed bales that are wrapped, and then you retired independently wealthy and moved to the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Then
I wish, but
and today it's still sitting in those bales, right?
Yeah, most of it is still sitting in those bales. We got some of it dried. Because we had a whole.
What are the challenges with that industry? Do you see? I mean, there was a lot of promises 2 years ago, right? Everybody planted it, and we were at a seminar, I think probably the same seminar or something. 100 farmers were there. 50 raised their hands that they'd planted it, and of the 53 people raised their hands that they had a contract to sell.
Yeah.
And of those 3, probably all 4 of them had their contract broken.
Oh yeah.
So
there was, because that's the thing I told in after the fact, was people like, well, why did you do it if you didn't have a contract? I said, I can't tell you how many people I knew had contracts in this industry. It didn't matter. They were only worth the word behind it, because there's no, like you said, the problem with this industry is it's not an industry yet. It's there's a few people consuming relatively CBD that takes a very small amount of acres to supply what's currently being consumed. There's some regulatory stuff in the way of consumption increasing, I think, but generally it kind of had that little fad, the CBD, and you don't know if it'll ever come back. I think hemp will make a comeback because of all the other applications of it, but the CBD portion, don't really know. But basically a few people were making a lot of money in like 1 or 2 years, drew this narrative of this industry that just this untapped potential. But 2019, everybody thought they were getting in on something on the ground floor, so to speak, and that the ship had already sailed. We found that out too.
Right.
But you tried, and you do things.
There you go.
But
so the benefit out of all that was a great experience. The partnership. That you made.
Right.
With the 2
Coming back to that.
That's
point.
where all this all came.
Right.
I mean, so sometimes, and I think farmers have to look at that, or business people too. Sometimes, things that you're doing today may not pan out, but it connects you to people or gives you a new perspective on something that does work out well going forward.
Because what that experience really did was just laid a foundation of trust, and we really built a good relationship with those two. And after the fact, we were still like kind of, because we're all from a small town, so we all know each other. We all live close by, and so we're still seeing each other and doing other business activities. And then we kind of just we're like, they threw out the, well, what if we came on with you guys on the farm in some fashion? And me and my brother kicked it around and talked with dad and mom and all these things. And we said, I think it would be worth it, because just what they bring to the table from their life experiences, the other businesses they've run, and some of the directions we want to take our farm in the future. I think there's things there that are mutually beneficial that can work. And so basically that experience, we built trust with each other, and we just, got to really know each other. You do a bunch of days when you're making these promises, I'm going to efficiently and professionally harvest your hemp. And then we look at each other, and we're trying to figure out how to get this header dialed in. And, when you go through an experience like that with somebody, and then it works out, and you figure it out together type of deal. And it's just, you build a lot of trust. And so that's kind of how that came about. And then, so now it's just, okay, they're on with us on the farm. They're bringing in that advisory, new perspective, and help us try and guide into the next generation here where we're trying to go.
We'll talk a little bit about that.
We're taking a short break to share that the AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by the team at Ag Solutions Network. Rooted in innovation, ASN is committed to leaving the land better than we found it, not simply maintaining it. We're here to help you navigate the balancing act of productivity and building a legacy. From practices to products, ASN is more than a new jug. It's a new way of thinking. So don't be afraid to be different. Be afraid to be the same. Contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm. And now back to our show.
Where do you guys, we have an idea where you're at today with the corn soybean rotation grain operation, the 2 or 3 sow units that where you're raising feeder pigs to sell feeders into the market. What does the future look like for you and your family, and where do you want to head? And how does this crazy regenerative soil health movement factor into all that?
Yeah. I think it depending on the 10-minute period of the day you ask me, I could give you a completely different answer on where we're headed or whatever. But, it's, I would say on the hog side, something like my sister and I have talked about is just, so like we're a confinement operation, right? And it's, confinements are the, in the eyes of the media and public, or just, they're looked at as like an evil of sorts. And, even though that's how the food is made in the country.
Right. And I don't think people have had the opportunity in a day like today. If you had a sow in the pasture in a modified A building, her could be snowed in and not able to get the food and water, and she'll eat her pigs. They don't know that. Or if she gets up and lays down on her pigs, that's what we came from before.
Farrowing. That's the thing people forget about confinement is we didn't just come up with this idea in a vacuum. There was reasons that drove that.
It wasn't us farmers thinking that, let's be evil and put them in a crate. It's like, no, we're trying to protect the piglets from getting killed by the mother. And so there was humane aspects to what we're doing. So
but that's not also to say that it's all perfect too.
It's not all rainbows.
I agree with a lot at least
it's what is it, the best worst thing we've got right now.
Pretty much, that's a good way of putting it. And but I think though on that side of things is it in our unique position in terms of so how the whole regenerative piece wrinkles in this is a couple years ago. Dad brought back a book from a conference, and it was Gabe's book, and I picked it up and just started reading it, and for me it was like,
admit it. You said you liked the cover of the book. You said it caught your eye.
He brought back from a conference Montgomery's book and Gabe's book. They were both just sitting there.
We got Montgomery's here.
These two books
were in the studio.
These two books.
And you look, Gabe's is blue and green and pretty and cows.
I saw the cows on the front.
And then here, David, you're just desolate. We're gonna have to tell Dave now his new books are a little nicer. Growing a Revolution. That's a pretty one. So David picked up on that too, I think.
Anyway. Because it was just sitting there, and I don't know. I just started reading it and got 20 pages in. Just that you're confronted with something you've never been confronted with, and I said, "Oh, this is interesting." I just kind of sparked that weird gut feeling. I said, I really think this is kind of without knowing anything about it, I said, this kind of feels like a good direction to be heading, and then that opened up for me personally, just a whole journey I've been on. I've been gone to, I went to one of Gabe's academies shortly thereafter and met a lot of the soil health, those guys. And
did they have the pink Kool-Aid there or the pink Kool-Aid,
all of them,
they make us drink all the Kool-Aid.
Okay. Right. Exactly. And, but no, it was good. And with the regenerative piece and been down that. So it's within the family operation. I would say my brother and I are by far the most passionate of the regenerative side. And that's
how did you get your brother? Sorry to interrupt, but how did you get your brother to, pick up the book and hear these things too, and sister or everyone in the family to get an awareness of this so that you're not the crazy prophet, how do you bring your family along with you?
I'm still working on that.
Okay.
I would say
that's fair.
It's my brother was really no work. My brother's it's where he doesn't get too excited about things, but he's very open-minded yet. And when he sees something that makes sense to him, he's just kind of the type who goes, yeah, okay. And then that's pretty much the end of it. He doesn't want to go on about all the, I'm the more passionate type. I'll talk and really, I want to dig into the nuts and bolts. He's just kind of like, okay, big picture. I see it. That makes sense. And kind of go that way. So he's just been more in that mode throughout this whole thing. Is I usually just tee him up with more info, like, hey, this is cool. You see this, or you read this, or I read about that. And so that's always the relationship's been good there. My sister, who was involved in the operation, she read Gabe's book too, because I told her, I said, read this, because she's like the type that's like me. She read it.
Saying your siblings listen to the little brother,
it depends on the day.
The chosen one.
Yeah,
right?
You're right. No, it's she read it and she also got just as excited as I did, which was really awesome. Because I was like one of those things. I was a little timid, in family, you're excited about something.
Absolutely.
And she had some passion about it too. And so she's very much on board. And then even with Dad, Dad doesn't read those things or watch the videos or much of that. He does on his own time. He doesn't really talk to me about it though. He just kind of has his own process with things. And he's kind of similar to my brother. He's always been open enough to these type of new ideas to allow them to happen on his ground and not get in the way of it. But then he's still not at the same time on the shouting the horn of, seed all the covers you can and get all the animals back out there. He's still very much got conventional principles to him, but it's very odd though, because I don't know some days don't know how to handle it, because I can't tell if he's in really conventional mode that day, or he's like, oh yeah, actually that makes sense day, and it's just depends on the day. But generally speaking, he's been mostly open to it in a fashion that allows it to happen.
So in a lot of families, that's pretty rare.
That's a huge thing. You can't get over
to
that
have
hurdle.
everybody to get, because there's always different personality types, different goals, those kind of things. How would you say for other family operations that are listening to this podcast today, what would you encourage to help, maybe brothers or sisters or cousins, family members, aunts, uncles, whoever that might be less receptive to exploring soil health type, regenerative type principles? What do you think would be some good things to suggest for them to try to share with family?
It's
Buy the book, give it to them.
Yeah, no, I think that really honestly is like, I think on a lot of family operations, there's not a lot of time spent stopping and reflecting, saying like, do we want to do this?
Doing stuff,
yeah.
Right?
Do like stop and ask that the members, if it's a family run operation, a true one, and it's like, the whole family, everyone's got a job of sorts, I think it's a good time to reflect every once in a while are you, let's say you're my brother, are you doing what you want to be doing? What do you see in the next thing? I think a lot of families don't ever stop to reflect and talk, take that moment to breathe and say, where are we going? Like time's gone by, dad's getting older, what's this? A lot of families, and that's how that generation, the family farms fold and don't make that leap to that next generation like they all want to do, is because they put all that off to the side till you have to deal with it. And that's
when the tire's blown out, it's not the time to fix
the emotions involved. And
correct.
That's not the time to do it. And
so how have you made time? How has your family just kind of made that time to connect on that bigger than just here's today's to-do list?
It got to the point where there was a lot of frustration. Like my sister and my brother, we've all had our periods of like very frustrated because we were doing a tremendous amount of work, raising the hogs and things like this, and saying, well, like this just ain't going to cut it long term. Like I want to get in on ownership or things like that, and so I think it's, how am I trying to put it? But it's important for family members to talk about what they want as individuals and make sure that those goals are aligned. But then like, okay, you say that and then action on that after that, like actually get something set up. So like we said, we want to run the grain business. We think we run separately. So we got it done. We just kept pushing
versus
forward.
just talking,
because I hit the point, me and my brother hit that point where we're like, my brother was like, well, I might just leave and start a trucking company. And, like, I don't want to work like what I'm working for the return I'm getting on, just enjoyment of life too. That's a huge part of it. We feel so married to like, you have to do things the one way, as if it's, just because you're farming differently doesn't mean you're still not farming and it's still not a family operation. It's like, I think a lot of families get tied to like the legacy of like how you're farming too, which that's just kneecaps the next generation, because the industries change.
So you're saying the key thing is don't be afraid to have that conversation today.
Yes.
Before, 1, 2, 5 years from now, it's like, I'm done. I'm walking.
Everyone
out.
was
I'm getting a job in town. I'm going to go.
Everyone's stressed out. There's been so much long-term tension not cleared, and you just get this tired feeling.
Is there anything that you guys do that kind of creates those moments to have those conversations? Do you guys get together for a lunch, breakfast, regular meetings, or things that you do as a group? Or
there's things I want to start developing, but no, it's very much ad hoc. It's one of those
but
things.
You just make a purpose of bringing up some of those long-term things on a more than a once a year basis.
Because I'm the type of individual, I can't sit in like quiet agony. Like I got to make it known. Like if I'm frustrated with something, I will make it known. And so it's like, it's as individuals, you got to push
brothers and sisters like, oh boy,
no. I'm actually, my brother would probably be the hothead of the group.
Okay.
And then I would be.
So you help get the conversation started.
A close second. And then,
that's good.
They start, and there's plenty of days where we're shouting and yelling at each other too.
Don't be afraid to talk about what everybody wants and what you want also as a group to accomplish, because you can't do it. You all have to have your individual goals, but you all have to agree on what is the general direction you want to hit.
Like if you as a family decide, hey, we want to see another generation make a run at this, make another 40 years, keep the family name going. Okay, if as a group you decide that, then you need to put the things in place that make the individuals feel comfortable with that. Because I see all sorts of family arrangements, and it's, you get in these weird situations where you got an 85-year-old manager, owner, dad, he owns all the assets and doesn't hardly do much of the day-to-day ops anymore. And then it's still bossing, making the decisions. And then you get these weird disconnects within the operation, and then the operations can hurt because of that.
Right.
Just the profit and loss type of thing. But then on top of that, the family structure too falls apart, because you get some of these families where you got 50 or 60-year-old with no equity, still running all the day-to-day ops. And they're like, oh, I just worked a whole career and I still don't own or anything. Yeah.
Right.
And so just different with us. I don't know why we chose to make this a point of emphasis sooner.
Right.
I'm an entrepreneurial spirited person. And I want ownership. That's like, I like to run my own type of thing. And so maybe it's just psychology related too, just personalities involved. But yeah, it's just important to do those things.
But definitely, small business owners, farmers that are listening today, definitely be intentional about it. Don't put it off, be intentional and make sure that that's part of the plan versus don't leave those kind of things unsaid. Yeah. Because it can make Thanksgiving, Christmas, family get-togethers, awkward.
Very awkward.
Get it discussed and going on. And, it was interesting. I was talking with Dr. Joel Groover in one of his classes, and he just threw this, question out unprepared. He says, what do you think some of the success factors are for a family farm continuing on? And I'm like, whoa, okay, well, that's a real easy question to answer here in a minute and a half, but one of the things I talked about is giving the younger generation operational decision-making capability, at an early age, because there are too many 60-year-old kids that when dad passes away, all of a sudden they don't have a clue what to do. They've just been told what to do all their lives. They're still, teenagers in business decisions. So, doing that. And then, the other thing I told them too is that, fair and equal aren't always the same thing, because when you have a family farm operation and there's multiple siblings involved, if you have people with outside farm income, if you just say, okay, we're going to divide those assets up when I die equally, right? And you got, let's say 2 are on the farm and 2 are off farm. Well, now you've just licensed the 2 that are on the farm to failure, because, the off farm people are making their income. The assets are required to generate that income that's required to support 2 on farm. So, fair and equal aren't always the same.
Right.
And, that's something that has to be addressed. And I think you're doing that with your business unit approach and what you have going on there. So yeah, key discussions to have, that is for sure.
Yeah. And on that, we talk about with the next generation is so much of it too, like beyond just, the family agreeing on, okay, can we manage together or figure out an ownership structure that works together? Like industries change. And like the hog industry, like our reality with the hog industry,
no change in the hog industry at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Dad was in the hogs, before the confinement model took over. Yeah. And the confinement model, the whole contract, put a barn up, contract finished for, the guy who has a sow farm down the road. That model worked great for about 30 years. And then it's like markets do. They grow, they mature, they consolidate. And now the hog industry is so consolidated. It's just such a different industry. And Dad tells me all the time, he goes, he just goes, Benny, I don't know this is so much different than it used to be. And he tells me that all the time, because these last several years have been the most, he said it, his own words, the most challenging of his whole career. And he's trying to just be on the backside of it, coasting on into where he wants to be comfortable. And some of the most challenging years. And for him, it's what's added so much stress is that it's just different than what he's always been accustomed to dealing with. And I think it's so important at that point where you're trying to transition is having those younger people involved in the management. So they have to be thinking as a manager, how am I going to keep the lights on, the people paid? I'm not viewing themselves as the owner as opposed to a worker, and being equipped, because that's going to set them up to say, okay, well, I have to figure this industry we're a part of. What's the new direction? Can we do another 40-year run of confinement hogs, the contract model like we've been doing, or has that run its course, or do we got to figure something else out? Right. That's where we're at. We just said, at least I don't personally think with our current model, we could do another 40 years because, the Packers own our margin. It's just a known thing in the hog industry. And so it's like, why play a game you're not going to win type of idea.
Like you were telling me too, it's like, and so what would I hear all the beef guys talking about the change in their industry and how the Packers are making all the margin.
And so would it be fair to me
to the hog industry? Right?
Yeah, exactly. The beef guys, I do have empathy for them right now because I know what that's like, but it's just like, just join the club. The dairy guys, they're not far behind either. That's consolidating quickly too.
Yeah.
But basically it's like, how could I expect my dad, he's got 40 years of a certain model experience, like to transform himself and figure a whole new way to run a business for, to set us up. I don't think that's his responsibility per se. I think there's responsibilities on both sides of that equation. It's not just the asset owner to say, okay, I will do everything right. I'll get all the things set up. And then, so you guys have a nice, easy transition or clear path of where to go. I think that younger generation has to say, okay, I want to do this. That's important. It's not just, I'm not obligated to do it. You have to have some passion involved. And then B, like, well, okay, well, what's the vision then for the business moving forward? Because things change. You go 40 years, markets change. You might have to do a different thing. Right. And so that's, I think, a big challenge for a lot of family farms is they want to say, I want to do another 40-year run with the next generation, but doing the same thing. And it's just unrealistic.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that you've been doing a little bit different on the crop side. Might mention kind of where you've come from. You've implemented strip till and how that transition's working for you. And then we've been talking a lot about cover crops and kind of future planning that could happen. But yeah, just give us a little perspective on how you're transitioning your crop production right now.
So I guess the kind of our journey there is like as recent as 2014, we were all corn on corn, everything, as many hog producers are. Owned a Dominator, Kraus Dominator chisel, and the whole thing, full tillage, conventional system, anhydrous. Usually in the spring, we never did much ball anhydrous, but the conventional model. And then started working with a different company on the input side, and then they kind of got us into some different practices like banding nutrients. So we, added nitrogen to the planter, souped up the planter, made them all fancy, and then transitioned to some strip till. You use that for a few years. Basically, we're still anhydrous and very conventional, just used strip till, I guess.
So shank type
deep tillage, still
using the ammonia bar as a strip till bar.
Well, it was a strip till bar that was equipped with ammonia.
Okay. Yeah. So at least then you got to where you're indexing your nutrients.
Yep.
Took a step up.
Yep. That was a step. We took it that way, and then kind of run with that model for 4 or 5 years. And then I got involved with the operation in 2019. Was my first crop, kind of half managing of sorts, but 2020 and then this year was my first like front to back, develop the whole plan, buy inputs and the whole bit. And I would say the outlier within the family, like we talked about earlier. I kind of started the process with I found that passion for this regenerative ag thing, whatever that means. It's such a broad term. And it's fun how loosely it's thrown around now. But
it's a popular word. A lot of people just grabbed on.
Yeah. I think keeping your focus on the principles and saying, okay, there's all sorts of, there's a million ways to skin a cat. The principles are the principles. Try to figure out a way that fits within your operation. And so like the last 2 years, I've tried to get covers on every acre we farm in the fall. We did wheat a couple the last year, and then this year we got a little bit more.
You're next to the Wisconsin border, so you're too far north to plant cover crops. Hasn't anybody told you that?
Yeah, that's what I hear.
You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, I mean it's there's challenges, but it's.
And I've been complaining about my short window, right?
Yeah,
it's like, gosh, she's 2 hours north of me.
Yeah, everyone has their challenges, and that the principle that took me the longest to kind of wrap my head around the best was that farming in your context idea of this. This is like, you really got to understand your environment, and then and really understand the fact, like even us 2 hours away, there is still some differences that that drive different results, outcomes, and you can't say this works there, and it's everyone's challenge to figure out what works in their area. And I'm still very much working on that, by the way. It's like, I've done fall cover crops, but not the growth I'm looking for. I'm not getting these magical 100 pounds of nitrogen grown.
I think every farmer is working on everything until they retire. That's just the nature of our beast.
Absolutely. That's good. That's a great point. But yeah, so it just, things like that, the cover crops, I got the small grain involved. And like this year, I was very excited. I did our wheat, and then I did a 12-way cover mix after that, and got this big field of flowers and stuff.
And you're working with the Practical Farmers Iowa group and leveraging that, and getting involved there. Might share with that.
Kind
of an innovative.
Yes, that was at Practical Farmers group there, and they did with ADM. PepsiCo, I think, was the company spearheading that, and they just a cost share. Throw a legume in. The minimum threshold is just throw a legume in after your wheat to try and offset some nitrogen for the following corn crop. And there's kind of two-parted. They'll help cost share on the actual cover crop seeded, and then there's a nitrogen rebate portion to it too if you reduce the following year.
It just helps.
It's trying. Their goal is to try and help get
a money maker, right?
No,
it just helps to offset a little bit of the cost to kind of entice you to try something different.
Yeah,
right.
Because for me, my specific individual cases, I was going to do it anyways, and so I looked at PFIs.
Sarah, okay, turn down the volume right now.
So like I'm the type of like when I just said I'm going to do it anyways. So I looked at the PFI program. I was like, well, this is just it's great. I'll just take advantage of something that's existing. But the program I think is designed well to try and lessen the blow or the idea of I'm spending these unnecessary dollars headed towards building my soil back. That's how it's viewed. It's like that's a complete waste of money.
Cover crops. Wow.
So might as well get some cost share out of it. And a lot of guys, if they only just throw a little bit of clover or something out there, they probably make money on the thing. But I put a real fancy mix out there, so I only got about half of my seed cost back. But I was fine with that. I said I got a lot of diversity out here for a relatively cheap cost. So that program existing, I'll do it again next year, and I think it's a good thing long term for guys to keep dipping a toe in the water.
So back to we went off to a tangent, and the two of us have done it a lot over the last 2 days. But you had the ammonia bar that was a strip till bar with ammonia, and then after that you transitioned to all planter nitrogen.
Yep.
And then you just because that was so much fun, you enjoyed towing the train around the farm so much, you decided to decouple the nitrogen from the planter, and you put that on with a strip freshener type yetter unit with airbags, and that's how your nitrogen goes down, and then your planter follows in that line. Yeah. So that's where you're at today. Right. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So today our current system on corn is the yetter strip freshener units that lay the nitrogen down in the spring and banding down behind each shark tooth on the rear, the nitrogen and sulfur. And there's 2 liquid hoses on that, and that's coming with our nitrogen, sulfur, and some other products in there too. And then our bean program is all no-till that just plant right into corn stubble. Well, it's been rye. Every acre. Are you planting green? Yes. Yeah. Great. Planted green 2 years now. This past year was better than the year before in terms of growth, but still not near where I want to be. That's where the whole challenge of being north is. You got to get the growth. Terminating your rye that's before the beans are up or after the beans are up? Before. We're all non-GMO, so we don't have a choice. Okay. And are you rolling down that cover crop, or are you just letting it melt down on its own? Yeah, it's not big enough. As far north as we are, to get a hollow stem, you're looking at mid, if it's planted in the fall. Yeah, if it's planted in the fall, timely, like October, before October 15th, you might get a few more days before that. But I mean, if you're a normal, like our normal falls, I mean, it's tail end of October, beginning of November or something, it ain't going to be very big in the spring, and you really got to wait to let it grow. And that's where, I know that it's one of those things, like you can try it on a small scale, but obviously don't go do that on everything right away. And so what are some of the things you like about planting green with your soybeans? Just planting green, everything is just I love it. It's as an operator, how it works. As an operator, it just blows. You wouldn't think it would. You wouldn't. And because the stuff that gets all the buzz is the guys going into the taller than the cab greenery. It's just cool. It's cool. It is cool. That was the thing that excited me about it so much. I looked at pictures like Russell Hedrick down there in North Carolina, and at one of those academies, and he was talking about his cover, and he had the pictures. I was just staring at that screen. You got to put a reversing fan on some of those with all the pollen coming off of the rye. I know but running the planter through green material, it's a dream. It's when it's green, it just gets out of the way. It doesn't wrap on stuff. And if we have a wet spring, you float better. You float better. Even in just the short couple years with limited growth, I've noticed out in the field observable, it's firmer. You can float across there. It's more mellow. The trenches close so nicely. And then, we terminate before emergence, which if you're non-GMO, you got to get it terminated before emergence. We had a couple, we actually had 300 acres of corn last year get up before we got burned down on the rye. We had just rye. It wasn't a mix.
And I had a 20-pound stand of rye grow next to corn all year, and you didn't believe me. I said,
this
you didn't
surprised
believe
the
me,
heck
but
out
it
of me.
happened. I got
This
the
surprised me.
numbers.
It's crazy.
It's
Listen to this.
probably an a fluke. I tell everybody that I said, I think it's
not
probably a fluke.
if it got observed though. See, you can't dismiss it. So
Yeah.
we need to figure out, rather than just like and write it off, you got to figure out, okay, why did that happen, and how could we duplicate that again? So
Yeah.
So you had the rye was up, and you're saying it was about what 6-8 inches tall when the corn spiked.
Yeah.
Non-GMO corn. Right. So now how do we kill the rye?
So I never killed it. I just was able to slow it down.
Stun it, right?
Stun it. So basically, right. My pre-emerge herbicide mix is like I run generic. So I do a generic Lexar basically mix, and then spiked with paraquat for the
quote
burn.
Unquote dual with atrazine and Callisto and one other metropuzine or something like that.
Yeah. And so basically that plus the paraquat burn down, I just had to pull the paraquat out, run my normal chemistry for the pre, and that basically, and this was all mediated through, ironically enough, like been working at the local co-op for 40 years, and go in this direction. I didn't know if he'd be super open to some of these things because he's worked with my dad forever, and Dad's been very conventional, but he was actually the best
doing.
Yeah, he was actually. I called him freaking out because I said, John, like, what am I doing? I got this corn's up. Like, what do we do? And he goes, yeah, that's not good. And then he goes, he goes, it could be worse though. He goes, I've seen worse. He goes, let's go look. And we went out in the field, and he goes, we're looking at, okay, sunlight getting down here is, what does the corn look like? And it looked fine. Because like I said, the planter had the nitrogen down with it. So the corn had an end source. It wasn't getting tied up. And then on top of that, I listened to David Kleinschmidt the year before with Understanding Ag. He told me only spread 20 pounds because if you run into a nightmare scenario
like this,
he goes, if you have an 80-pound stand of rye, you're tying up every bit of N in that system. Right. So he goes, 20 pounds is something that the system can handle.
Plus, in my experience, when you go to 20 pounds like that, it takes longer to get growing vertically because it will spend more time tillering.
Yeah.
Okay. So like when you're in an 80-pound environment, you'll get maybe 1 to 3 tillers per seed. Where you're in a 20-pound environment, you're going to get that 7 to 8 tillers per seed. And it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 days per tiller. So essentially you kind of, you don't allow it to grow as tall.
Yeah.
You kind of delay that height extension by 2 weeks when you plant thinner.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's weird too, like the corn, when we were observing and scouting it, it was compared to the corn that had properly burned off cover, and the cover, paraquat gets rid of residue like that. And it's back to a bare field, especially if it's only a thin stand.
Right.
And it grew like skinnier, it elongated the stem more because it was trying to push for sunlight.
And that's that far infrared, near infrared light ratio.
Yeah. And
we've talked about.
But it was different. But it was like, okay, well, it still looks good. It's very green. It doesn't look like it's struggling. And we just kind of let it go. And
I get a kick out of this. You call it where we did it the right way. But what was the yield results?
So that was the thing too, is that field ended up being our best yielding field.
Now, wait a minute. So you meant to say where I did it the wrong way and sprayed it out. I had less yield. Yeah.
Yeah. But to give context that too, within that season, we really kind of like went cold turkey because the financial position we were in that year was not good. And we really went cold turkey, cut out a lot of stuff we were using. So the stuff on the conventional acres, I still don't say it's a totally fair comparison because it wasn't what we were doing exactly before, but it was still very much the conventional model of just.
You need to try that accident again.
Yeah, I agree.
So every time you make an accident on a farm, learn from the accident. And if there's something to learn there, and if you think, well, we had some major changes that year, well, maybe you need to duplicate that again. How could you do that this coming year?
Duplicate another grass with a grass. I don't know.
Something to think about. I mean, it was kind of an interesting thing. I wouldn't do it on the whole farm.
Well, yeah,
maybe 10 acres, 20 acres somewhere, and take a look at it again. Maybe within your area, or maybe you're not set up this year to do it. If you go into next year with a 10-pound seeding rate or something like that to try, it'd be interesting.
Yeah. So, because like the cover program I run now for next year was in front of my corn. I did a 3-way mix of 20 pounds of a grass. I think I did triticale this year to I have cereal rye before I went to triticale, just new species.
Half
whatever.
right.
Yeah, right. And so that's like a 20 pounds there, and then a few pounds of a couple legumes in there in front of the corn. And then the beans, I just run a straight heavy rate of rye because of the
What's a
the
heavy
common-
rate of rye?
like 80 pounds ish. I mean, that's not really heavy for rye, but that's,
Right.
for a
That's
cover
a
crop,
good
that's
amount.
pretty dense.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, we try to run as thick of a stand because I know beans love to grow with another grass,
Right.
plant green into that because rye for the weed control on beans.
So
That's the big thing.
extra costs with the 80 pounds and this other stuff going on, and the seeding costs and running the turbo tiller and such. So you got some investment going on here. What are some of the benefits that you see out there, both monetarily, but also you just know things that you can't quantify benefits?
Yeah.
So both quantifiable and not
Yeah,
quantifiable.
that's what if you're going to go down the regenerative path, you have an interest in going that, like, there's certain things you're going to just have to accept in your head that you're going to have to like have a certain level of dissonance going on of like, I can't put this to paper, but I
Right.
believe it. And it
Mhm.
comes down to a belief system. And that's what irritates a lot of people because they don't understand it or don't want to and don't believe it. So a portion of it is you just got to believe you're doing the right thing. And I would say, like, on the monetary side, it's just
Probably some weed control.
yes, weed
Okay.
control is a big one. I would say like rye, because when we did hemp in 2019, we just did an oat cover crop in front of hemp, and that was terminated and tilled like to death before we put this hemp in. And that oats, like when I send you that webinar, you'll see it was like 3 weeks of like a clean field, and it was like all the sunlight in the world hitting this dirt.
Mhm.
And I was like, what's going on here? Like, it's been 3 weeks and we still, because we're waiting with the hand hose like day one, like, all right, we heard about these weeds, got to get in front of them. And
Mhm.
we had a window there. We're like, well, dang, the hemp actually had time to get out and get started before the weeds came in. And, it wasn't a perfect field by the end of the year, but it was enough of an observation where you realize, okay, there's weed control benefit to this. And so I've noticed it in the beans. Granted, non-GMO beans, I'm not running Roundup at any time of the year. I had some weedy bean fields last year. I did. And, anyone who lives around us
Diversity.
saw it. Yeah. Diversity and a bruised ego is what that is. And, but no, I had some weedy beans, but, it was still not terrible, and
What were
raised
some of the
good
other
yields.
that you can put some dollars on benefits that you can see out of cover crops? You got some weed control aspects, ability, bigger windows to be able to plant.
Yeah.
You can.
We haven't totally haven't experienced that yet because, just we haven't had the conditions that
Okay.
force that yet. Cause like 2019, we weren't doing covers yet. And that was the crazy.
Yeah.
2020. So until I'm hoping to be set up for that next big crazy spring to where like, hey,
Okay.
we're actually out there.
Just for the listeners out there, we're not wishing a 2019
No.
on anybody again.
No, absolutely
I
not.
think Indiana and Ohio got that this year, and they don't need that again.
But
So.
my thoughts is I'm trying to be set up if that happens again. Just a thing. But even
I
just
think that's
small.
That's a great point. You have to be ready for those extremes.
Yeah. Right.
We're going to get them.
Yeah. Because when I see the pictures of the regen guys who share, look at this drought year, D4 drought, and I've got green corn that put an ear on, and everyone else around me is complete loss on insurance. I see them pictures. I said,
It's all Photoshop.
yeah, it's all
No, I'm
Photoshop.
joking.
And I see that and I go, I want to be in that position next
There
time
you go.
something like that happens in my area. And so,
Have you noticed erosion wise, runoff wise,
Yeah.
and you've got some hills on a portion of your
Yep.
farm?
yeah, we've got our
Big
farm
advantages
split
there. The
between.
real erosion between terraces. You notice that? too?
Yeah, I've noticed to start out, only being a couple years into it, I've still noticed on small levels, less erosion and things like that.
Yep.
Some of our ground is so flat, you hardly notice it anyways. But we do have some hills and stuff like that where we're seeing, it's just two of our junkier farms. That was the interesting thing last year. Two of our junkiest farms, like they're the one we call the rock pile, right? And
That's
that
what it is.
field, we did the rye with the corn thing. That was one of those fields that didn't
Mhm.
die. And we just slowed it down with the rye. That field did the best it's ever done that year. It wasn't the best field of the whole farm that year, but for that field, it
But
had
if you're
beat its
comparing
old.
the rock pile to flat black square. I mean, that's
Right.
that's
And
not a
that
fair
year,
comparison, so.
no, it's not. But you gotta compare everything to itself when it comes to farming,
Right.
on farms
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And that field, we're just like, oh. And I think that year, it's a little bit sandier type soil. I don't know if we got normal rainfall that year. And so that ground is better in those type of situations because it dries out so much faster than the flat stuff. And I think the rye had a big effect in just the structure or water holding capacity in a little bit sandier type, or don't necessarily totally know. Otherwise, I just observed a very, very good yield on a field that,
well, I think it
had no business making that. That was the
I know
weirdest
this
thing.
is going to be an incredibly profound statement, but good fields are just inherently good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do much to them to make them better. They're just plain good.
They're already at
It's
that.
the marginal fields where we can have those dramatic increases.
Yeah.
And I think the good news is those fields have become marginal because of our historic farming practices.
Yeah.
Guess what? That rock pile, it was moldboard plowed.
Yeah. It was
probably for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
Before they finally gave up on it, because they'd sent everything down the river.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing. I haven't seen the field, but that's just the nature of what agriculture's been, and David talks about in his dirt book there, right?
Yeah.
That's you farm it, wear it out, and away you go.
When I think of these things a lot,
It's a way to restore it. It's a way to bring it back.
Yeah, a big part of my why involved in this whole process, like why I even wanted to go a regenerative route, was like, I hear the things that David says, and I'd say, this is a foreseeable end. Why?
There's no other new place to move.
Like this has happened before. Like we've watched all these other civilizations do the same thing. We very openly talk about the amount of runoff in the river every year. Like it's not like it's a question of if there's runoff. It's just the question is how much.
And Jerry Hatfield, for every ton of corn we raise, we send 2 or 3 tons.
Those statistics, just when those statistics hit me the first time I heard them, I was like, what? That's true? And like I verified it, and I just said, oh, wow, like, that's a problem. This has because I think long term, and my biggest challenge individually is stopping and getting in the present and like breaking it down into its parts and like doing things. I'm always gravitating towards long term, and so like when I hear those facts, I go, well, there's an end to this. I don't want to be the poor guy at the end of the
in our industry
thing. I don't want to be the one stuck with it.
In our industry today calls what we're doing sustainable.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to beat on it too much, but it's just
it's not.
There's a lot of
we're being
dissonance.
lied to.
Yeah.
So anyway, going forward, what do you need to be successful and where you want to get?
What do I
What's
need?
missing?
What's missing?
What's needed in this space to help farmers get to regenerative?
Yeah. So that's where I just think more work. Like the conversations with this always start out with, and it kind of annoyed me to begin with when I started going to conferences and stuff. It always starts out with mindset discussions of like changing your paradigm and the way you see things, like in Gabe's Academy and all these other ones I've gone to. And they always talk about mindset first. I'm like, why can't we just get to the nuts and bolts?
Yeah,
like, let's talk about
changing paradigm. Yeah. Us too. We're guilty.
And it annoys me because I'm very anti-cliche personality. I don't like those things that make me uncomfortable. I just generally whatever. I like to talk about like substance things but it's so important is changing your mindset first, like understanding, like you just have to look at it different to begin with, to even begin to understand where you're headed. And I just think it's like what's missing in, not necessarily in regenerative ag, is the enthusiasm's there and the passion. It's the getting rid of this, like this mentality in ag that's like, we think in absolutes, like there's only the regenerative route or the conventional route. And there isn't like a million different models in between that mesh between the two that could come to fruition. But what it's been painted as is you're either in the regenerative side or the conventional side.
Organic, zero input.
Yeah. It's the extremes.
Or your, commercial 25,000 acre, is conventional.
Yeah. Life is shades of gray. I'm finding out this is like there's no one word answer to like any question. As I grow up, I'm just like, because it frustrates me. I want it sometimes an answer to just close off a question, and I never get satisfied because I'm like, oh, well, it depends is usually what the answer is. And so like with farming, I just think it just the mindset, both sides of the equation have to say, well, the regen guys can't just sit there and go, well, I'm the one doing the right thing. You need to do exactly what I'm doing. And then, then the other side, the conventional guys need to just,
then we're fighting each other and the enemy's not.
Yeah.
within.
So like the CAFO model, something like my sister and I have talked about, we go, this business has really ground our enthusiasm to raise hogs, like really ground it out. Like it's like we take care of the people we pay and we all work together and try to do this. And we're not having as much fun as we used to. And you don't feel like the worth or the why is there anymore, because you're just sending general pork out to the market, to the Smithfield to do whatever with. And just kind of what it is. But like on the CAFO model, who's to say you can't come up with the hybrid CAFO barn setup system where you can have aspects of regenerative grazing, like
Or
exposed to the
Or
ground.
you produce feeders that are willing to go out, or pasture-based feeder
Yeah.
genetics.
Yeah. It's,
Like, because guess what? There's a whole bunch of
yeah,
people looking.
because the way I look at this, you know so much more about the history of farming than I do, because I'm only just begun like my reading books about the
That
past
was a
stuff.
very nice way of saying I'm old. Thank you.
Well, because everything I talk to you about, you go, oh yeah, I read about that 30 years ago. And I'm like, dang it, what does Monty not know here? He goes, yeah, that's old news. I'm like, well, to me, it's
That's
like
a nice way of saying
whole
I'm a
new
know-it-all
world.
too.
And I'm just looking at it, I go, to me, it feels like where we're at in ag is like this, there's like kind of a new frontier, so to speak, of like this regenerative space. And like, it's getting all this buzz, but then it's still like some of the guys who get the most attention don't have models that scale or are readily applicable. It really takes like a total dive into a new thing.
Mhm.
The key to getting wide scale adoption is going to be, you don't have to completely transform yourself like a conventional guy, so to speak, to make some changes.
Right.
I think there's just like this whole open opportunity, level of opportunity involved in like coming up with new models or business ideas involved in that space where you're melding the two of these worlds together and coming up with something that net is better. Maybe it's not perfect. There's no such thing as the perfect system, but better than what was.
And I'll conclude with this, because we're having a lot of fun today running long, but that's okay. I'm sure we got people still tuned in here, but I think that's why it's important that we need to have, instead of an absolutism approach to the labeling like organic is, we need to have a relative scale approach to labeling to help the consumer understand the products we're making, to where we have a 1 to 100 scale, depending on the points that we're doing. What were we doing for animal welfare, carbon sequestration, nutrient density, sustainability, diversification, community, blah, 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 blah. All of these value adds that regenerative offers, we get scored on. And if you're making a 20-point product, you get a 20-point base premium. If someone else is making an 80-point product, they get an 80-point. Because asking them to be 100 or nothing, you're right, won't happen.
Yeah.
And if we have some sort of relative scale in there, I think that's going to help accomplish that mission and make it simple enough for a consumer to understand, appreciate, and enjoy.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing where you guys go, you and your family, and how you continue to adopt the soil health principles. And I definitely appreciate the context. I don't think context is a principle. I think context is like a law.
Yeah.
That overarches all
Right.
5 principles,
Yeah.
And
It's the thing that grounds the rest of them. type of thing.
absolutely. That's just a given.
Yeah.
But no, I really appreciate it. It's been fun spending the last day with you and bouncing ideas off of different ideas for
Vice
your
versa.
operation. And thanks for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Any other thoughts before we leave?
No, I don't think so.
We'll just get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just be rambling more. So you don't want that.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ben. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, this conversation with Ben is so encouraging. The way his family approaches change and how they work together to communicate their individual desires and goals, well, that's just exciting. And communication is really a big part of the equation. Recognizing that there are different ways for different types of operations to implement practices that build resilience in today's agriculture, well, that's just exciting to hear. And as always, if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing to help growers implement soil health practices, check out our website at asn.farm. And there you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.